I'm djTLM, and this is Share the Knowledge.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's djTLM, the Last Mohican, and you're checking out episode 31 of Share the Knowledge right here on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Anchor, or maybe you're checking out the video version on YouTube. This is my educational Q&A show for DJs where I try to answer as many questions as possible. I want to start to talk about the basics that are needed when you want to learn how to scratch. Now, this actually fits in pretty well with a video that I just released actually 2 days ago or yesterday, and that is a new edition of the Saturday Sessions videos, and it was an edition for beginners. If you're not familiar with my Saturday Sessions videos, those are interactive scratch sessions where I use a beat, I put on a beat, and I start to scratch. I scratch for a couple of bars. After that, I stop, and you, the viewer at home, can use the next couple of bars on that beat to scratch. Then you stop, and I'll start scratching again, and we go back and forth. Hence, it turns into an interactive scratch session. Now, normally I just freestyle, do whatever comes to mind when it comes to scratching, and people at home do what they want to do. In this case, I thought it would be more interesting to make an edition, especially for beginner DJs. So all the scratches that I did were really some of the most basic scratches. And the reason I did those basic scratches is to allow beginners to look at my scratches, hear my scratches, and then try to emulate what I did. So I'm basically becoming your online sparring partner, and I'm giving you examples of possibilities when it comes to making scratch patterns. And I'm only using some of the most basic techniques like the baby scratch and simple cuts and doing a simple fade. So those are the first scratches when it comes to learning how to scratch. So if we're talking about the basics, you have to start at the very beginning. And I'm not even going to get into having a sense of rhythm and knowing how to count music, because that will come into play once you start to scratch over beats. But let's just start at the very beginning when it comes to scratching. Now, what is scratching when you think about it? It is the back and forth motion that your hand makes on the platter that makes that sound. You can scratch with any sound out there. You just grab the platter, move it back and forth, and you're scratching with that sound. Now, the basic scratch where it all begins is just that. It is moving your platter, that could be a turntable platter, controller, CDJ, moving it back and forth rhythmically, and that is called the baby scratch. That is where it all begins. You start by practicing that movement, moving the platter back and forth. Slow, faster, try different tempos, but as soon as you get the hang of that feeling, you start to make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, and now you'll add a beat. And this is the most important part of scratching. You have to try to maintain rhythm when you scratch over that beat. So you want to make sure that you're scratching on beat. So the same way that a rapper, when he's rapping over an instrumental, has to stay within the rhythm, you have to do the same with your scratching. You can't just put on a beat and scratch in a totally different rhythm. That's what you see if you're in a club and you see people who actually can't dance. It looks like they're listening to a different beat than the beat that you're playing. So you start at that very beginning. And for some people that might sound boring, but I've actually seen a lot of people who've never scratched before. And I did some workshops, and you just bring them over to the set and you allow them to try that baby scratch, moving their hand back and forth. Now, at first, they think, hey, this sounds pretty cool. They're hearing that that scratch sound, but then you challenge them and you add that beat. Take a simple, just like a normal tempo, not too fast, not too slow. And then you tell them, okay, now scratch on that rhythm. So keep your scratch on point with that. For a lot of people, it gets a lot more challenging at that point. And then they find out, hey, maybe this is not as easy as I thought it was. It always looks so easy when I see DJs do it, but it's actually a little bit more difficult. That's where it all begins. You don't even have to have the power on the turntable or whatever you use. Just hold your hand on that platter, start to move it back and forth. Once you get the hang of that feeling, you find out what works most comfortably for you as far as hand placement, and then you add a beat and you try to keep that rhythm going. Try to stay on beat while you're scratching. Now, of course, if you just hear me talk about it, it might not make all the sense in the world to you. So I suggest you go and check out my scratch tutorial series on YouTube. It's just called Scratch Tutorial. I think if you type in Scratch Tutorial on YouTube in the search box, you get my video first. I'm not sure anymore, but that happened for a while. But look for my scratch tutorial. The first video is all about using that baby scratch and just trying to scratch on beat. Afterwards, you can get into all sorts of techniques using the faders, but for those first techniques, you don't even have to touch the mixer. Just find the sound and the platter and practice that, and practice it over a beat. And in my next tutorial videos, like part 2, 3, 4, I get into faders and all of the different things you can do with that. Then it gets more difficult. Now you have to get into your hand coordination because two hands will be doing two different things. One hand will be on the platter, another hand will be on the fader, and they're not always making the same move. So there's a lot more to talk about, but when we're talking about the basics, all I want to talk about now is the baby scratch. Now, in follow-up to the scratch question that I just answered, I have a question on Facebook from Mike, and the question is, learning how to scratch, which hand should you use? I'm right-handed, but I tend to favor my left hand more than my right. All right, here's the thing. You have to find out what works for you. There are no rules, and I know a lot of DJs that can only scratch with their right hand on the platter, left hand on the fader, or left hand on the platter, right hand on the fader, and that's what they stick with. So just imagine if they use their right hand on the platter, left hand on the fader, if they're using their right deck, that works perfectly. When they're scratching on the left deck, they have to like cross their hands to make that scratch actually work. Now in my case, I scratch with both hands, but I can't really do the same scratches with both hands. So some scratches I prefer to do with my right hand on the platter. The others I prefer to do with my left hand on the platter. So I'm right-handed, but there are certain scratches, like the transform scratch, I love to do with my right hand on the fader, so left hand on the vinyl. And I don't know, that's because I guess I can be really fast with that hand and do the transform and like crab scratches with that hand. But when it comes to like flare scratches, I have my left hand on the fader, right hand on the platter, and chirps and stuff like that. So find out what works for you, but I would definitely try to practice scratches with both hands because that allows you the most options on any setup. You can do the cross hand scratch thing, but to me it still always looks less dope. Sometimes it looks uncomfortable. You see DJs like, they're trying to do the scratch like that. So it would be dopest if you are able to do that. I can't do a lot of scratches with both hands, but I always see the comments when I do a Saturday Sessions video and I switch between turntables like, whoa, you can do scratches with both hands. Well, yeah, some, but a lot of DJs can't. For me, it just worked out naturally like that. So try both.